This is BYU Sports Nation, brought to you by the BYU Store, simulcast on BYU TV and BYU Radio. Now, from Studio B, here's Spencer Linton and Jarom Jordan.
BYU Sports Nation is live, your day-to-day play-by-play in Studio B, presented by the BYU Store, official outfitter of BYU fans everywhere. Tuesday, November 30th, the final day of No Loss November. Wherever and however you're connected, great to have you with us. I am Spencer Linton, teamed up with a guy who is petitioning for 24/7 access to the BYU private jet, Jarom Jordan.
Yes, I am, and I'm losing my voice as well. Lincoln Riley's USC contract, incredible. According to Robert Hefner V, I don't know if this is even credible. 100, but this tweet is incredible. Lincoln Riley, 110 mil. USC's buying both his houses in Norman for $500,000 over asking price. They're buying a $6 million home in LA for him, and he has unlimited use of the private jet 24/7 for his family.
Does anybody have any other questions about why Lincoln Riley decided to leave Norman and go to Los Angeles and coach USC? I think that pretty much outlines it.
Yeah, everyone can be bought. You know what I'm saying?
2 homes in Norman, $500,000 over asking on both of them. So essentially a $1 million bonus on top of a $110 million contract.
Well, that 500 over asking is what Utah County housing is like right now too. So, yeah.
That's VIP treatment.
Oh my gosh.
And we have a VIP show lineup for you. The college football playoff rankings. What has to happen for BYU tonight? Speaking of Lincoln Riley in Oklahoma, they're out of it, it would seem. Does BYU jump the Sooners? Is that part of why he bolted for USC? Will the Cougars indeed climb into the top 12? Plus, who else needs to win for BYU's best New Year's Six shot? We will outline all of it. Blaine Fowler, dual threat analyst, will join us to discuss that and some BYU basketball. And how about Tegan Graham of 21st ranked BYU women's basketball, the New Zealand star, on how the Cougars got it done in back-to-back ranked wins. Bring on today's BYU Sports Nation headlines.
NFL Network reporter Ian Rappaport says Taysom Hill's taking first-team reps in practice ahead of the Cowboys game, this week, Thursday night. Hill has been battling a foot injury recently. If healthy, it appears he could start. That's awesome.
Go Taysom. Okay, this is what we were talking about a few weeks ago.
Yep.
Why isn't he starting? Give him a shot. And it looks like they will. Yep. BYU offensive tackle Campbell Barrington has been named to the Maxwell Football Club Freshman All-American team, one of 37 players on that Maxwell Football Club. Sean Alexander, Freshman of the Year watch list. Outstanding for Campbell Barrington.
Women's hoops jumps into the AP poll at number 21. Awesome. Cougars play at Utah Saturday night. And Shaylee Gonzalez is the West Coast Conference Player of the Week and ESPN. I sound terrible. National Player of the Week after 3 wins, including 2 versus ranked opponents. Gonzalez hit the game-winning free throws versus West Virginia with 3.1 seconds left in the game. This team is awesome, led by Shaylee Gonzalez.
Absolutely. I think you sound sultry. Don't be so hard on yourself.
I do not, but thank you.
Trust me, if there's somebody that understands a messed-up voice and health situation for the last, half a year, I got you,
Half a year? Jeez.
4th ranked and 11th seeded BYU women's volleyball dominating the West Coast Conference yearly awards. Heather Olmstead named Coach of the Year. Kenzie Kerber, Player of the Year. Whitney Bauer, Setter of the Year. 2nd consecutive year she's won that. Taylin Ballard-Nixon, Bauer, Kennedy Eschenberg, Heather Knighting, and Kerber all selected to the 16-member All-WCC first team. Aaron Livingston on the second team, and Maddie Allen was named honorable mention. Is there anybody that didn't win an award on the BYU women's volleyball team?
Yeah, what in the world? That's crazy, man. Ashley Hatch scores again for the United States in the second friendly versus Australia down under. It was in the 4th minute, so not as fast, 24 seconds, but still awesome.
And what are you doing, Ashley?
Yeah, game finished in a 1-1 tie, but Ashley Hatch crushing it.
Connor Mance and Whitney Orton also crushing. Named men's and women's NCAA National Athletes of the Year in cross country and track and field. They're the first teammates to sweep NCAA national titles since 1988. Outstanding. How about Whitney doing it in her final race? Connor going back-to-back. Love it. All rise and shout. It's time for What's Trending.
You're talking about it, and so are we. It's what's trending on BYU Sports Nation.
The penultimate college football playoff ranking in the 2021 college football season. I want you all to think about the following fact for a moment. Dating back to late, or I should say early November of last year, BYU football has been in every single college football playoff ranking.
That's exciting.
That before never being in the college football playoff ranking from 2014 until they jumped in 2020. But here we are. The Cougars expected to make maybe a jump tonight. Will they climb from number 13 to number 12? Let's discuss. Jarom, what needs to happen tonight and this weekend in the college football playoff rankings to keep hope alive for BYU's New Year's 6 pipe dream, if you will?
Yeah, obviously, there's got to be some stuff. We've talked about it. In fact, why don't you outline it, and then I'll talk about sort of the danger of the teams behind BYU that we haven't talked about as much, that it's like, oh, well, hopefully this team and this team wins too.
Okay. First and foremost, and we alluded to this already, BYU needs to jump Oklahoma in tonight's ranking, meaning the Cougars have to go from 13 to 12. And here's why I think that will happen.
Because Oklahoma lost.
Oklahoma lost, yes. But Lincoln Riley is gone. The juice on the Sooners is really low. Stock is low. So while they are, yes, a name brand program, your head coach is headed out of town, and you just lost to Oklahoma State. Second loss on the resume. They have the same number of losses as BYU. And the committees never liked Oklahoma in the first place. They never bought into what their resume looked like. So I anticipate the BYU will be number 12. That is significant because we all pointed to number 12 as kind of the de facto cutoff line if you're really going to be considered for a New Year's 6 bowl game.
Oklahoma lost, therefore they're going to fall a few spots. Even if Lincoln Riley's there, they were going to fall, I think, behind BYU.
Number 10, but they lost to number 7.
Yeah.
So would they only drop 2 spots and leave BYU at 13?
What have you done for me lately? I just think they were going to drop regardless. They lost. See ya. Bye.
Okay. So Oklahoma, we think, will be down. BYU and everybody else ahead of the Cougars. Michigan State, Oregon specifically will jump up 1 spot. And then it doesn't really matter what happens in the top 5 per se. It does matter what the top 5 do in their championship games this weekend. So just watch for BYU to jump Oklahoma. That's first and foremost. Then how about the teams to root for this week, Jarom? Starting with Cincinnati against Houston. BYU needs Cincinnati to win out, stay undefeated, and stay in that top 4 so the Bearcats don't fall down and take another at-large spot away, which would essentially end any hope that BYU has. They got to beat Houston.
Yeah, since he's in the New Year's 6 and not in, if they're in a New Year's 6 game, not in the playoff, they take an at-large spot.
Secondly, everybody that likes BYU, roots for BYU, needs to become a huge Oklahoma State fan this week against Baylor. And I know some of you are saying, well, wait, Baylor beat BYU, and so doesn't it make BYU look better if Baylor keeps on winning? Not necessarily for the New Year's 6 chances. If Baylor keeps on winning, then they're going to keep BYU out of a New Year's 6 bowl game, likely the Fiesta if it happens. So root for Oklahoma State, the more convincingly the better, to beat Baylor so that BYU could then jump Baylor, who would have 3 losses, including 2 losses to Oklahoma State, and then sneak in as maybe the final at large.
Yeah, root for the 1-loss team, not the 2-loss team. So the 1-loss team's even better and the 3-loss team's even worse.
Okay, we're not done yet. And this is where it gets kind of tricky. Alabama and Georgia are going to play for the SEC championship. We think Georgia's going to win that game. But
everyone does.
If Alabama wins that game, that would assure that the SEC gets 2 teams into the college football playoff, you would think.
Which means Ole Miss goes to the Sugar.
Correct.
It's not an at-large. So that's what we want. Yeah.
So if Alabama drops out of the top 4, then Alabama becomes the SEC team that goes to the Sugar Bowl.
And then Ole Miss is an at-large.
Taking it away from BYU.
Yep. Next.
Okay. Don't want that. Next, number 2 Michigan against number 14 Iowa. BYU needs chalk to hold here and Michigan to win the Big Ten championship so the Wolverines stay in the top 4. And that team, as you were talking about, Jarom, behind BYU, doesn't come up and steal a bid from the Cougars.
That's Iowa. If Iowa beats Michigan, Iowa will jump ahead of BYU, I believe, because they'd have, you could argue, unless Alabama beats Georgia, the best win in college football this year because it'd be number 2 and it'd be this late, right? So Iowa's not going to the playoff, but Iowa would go to the Rose.
Yes.
Right? And then all of a sudden, Michigan is the next best Big Ten team who's an at-large team at that point. And now Ohio State might even get in, right? Another at-large spot. So then Michigan State's on the outs, right? Like Outback Bowl or something. So, yeah, you need some stuff to be chalky. The other one is Utah. I think that if Utah blew out Oregon again, there is danger of the Utes flying up the board. I don't know if they'd pass BYU, but they might make it uncomfortable, right? To where they've played really well down the stretch. Yes, they have 3 losses, but BYU having a bye this week, not playing in a title game. There's risk of losing and being exposed, right? But there's also the opportunity to win and look even better. Like Notre Dame's might not be in the playoff because they're not playing anybody this week, right? If Notre Dame was in a league and they beat somebody and won, like they help their cause. You can hurt your cause too. BYU can't help or hurt its cause. It just kind of has to watch.
Utah is an interesting case. How will the committee, if the Utes beat the Ducks again and are going to the Rose Bowl and finish with 3 losses, but a head-to-head loss to a 2-loss BYU, I do not know how they would justify putting Utah above BYU in any way.
Yeah, I'm not saying they will, but I'm saying they might be like in the mix, which I think all of us are like, ew.
Okay.
BYU beat Utah and we're good, you know.
The feel-goods.
Well, like, think of it from the Utah perspective, which we never do here. And why would we? Is they've always thought, would we sacrifice a loss to BYU for the Rose Bowl?
They absolutely
And this year, that might be the case, right? They're one game away. But Utah has shown that they haven't won the game that mattered yet. Like, in the awesome history of Utah football the last 10 years, they haven't won the big game. Well, hey, we blew out Oregon a couple weeks ago. Okay, but if you don't win this week, you don't go to the Rose. This is a huge game for Utah this week. So go Ducks. Go Ducks.
Yeah, and I know that some of you are thinking, well, wait, Oregon's ranked ahead of BYU. So don't we need Utah to beat Oregon to make BYU look better? And the answer is no, because that team is going to take the Rose Bowl spot regardless. And whether BYU is number 11 or number 10, the same number of at-large possibilities would remain for BYU, whether they're number 10 or number 11. It doesn't really matter.
It doesn't matter at all.
Okay,
Yeah.
So let's recap. Ideal scenario, BYU, they did their part to win out and finish 10-2.
Yeah.
Finish ranked in the top 11. Okay, Cincinnati makes the playoff, opening up an at-large spot in the Peach Bowl. Baylor loses in the Big 12 game. More lopsided, the better, to Oklahoma State. And then the Bears finish with 3 losses. Alabama beats Georgia in the SEC title game. Both teams make the college football playoff. And Michigan wins the Big 10, and they make the college football playoff. Now, if the majority of those things, if all of those things happen, okay, a scenario like this could unfold in the projected college football final rankings. Georgia, number 1. Michigan, number 2, Alabama, number 3, Cincinnati, number 4. So there's your college football playoff. Cincy would play Georgia, Michigan would play Alabama.
You think Alabama would be 3 if they beat Georgia?
Well, I mean, they could jump up to number 2. I don't know.
I think they'd be 2 even with 2 losses because they'd have the best win in college football at that point.
Doesn't really matter because they would still play Michigan, the 2-3 game.
And Georgia would stay at 1 with the loss?
Yes. I just think that they've done so much that they deserve the number 1 spot overall. Alabama lost to Texas A&M.
Typically, you lose, you get off, even if, yeah. What would they put Michigan, who has the same amount of losses, in there at 1? It's
no, because they want to avoid a Georgia-Alabama.
Cincinnati's number 1 and undefeated.
You know, the committee is going to avoid a Georgia-Alabama rematch in the first round of the playoff.
I think so. Yeah.
So that's why I think Alabama will be 2 or 3, and Georgia stays number 1.
Since he would feel like it should be 1 at that point.
As the only undefeated team?
Yeah.
Okay. At number 5, Oklahoma State. Now, this is significant. Oklahoma State obviously feels like, hey, what if Georgia blows out Alabama? Maybe we can sneak in as the 4th team in the college football playoff. Now, if that happens, then that's trouble for BYU too, because then Alabama falls and takes an at-large spot, thus pushing Ole Miss down. Sorry, Alabama takes the Sugar Bowl. Ole Miss goes down to an at-large, and bye-bye New Year's 6 hopes for BYU.
You'd put Ohio State over Notre Dame with 2 losses. Notre Dame has 1 loss?
Yes.
I would think they'd put Notre Dame ahead of Ohio State there with the 1 fewer loss.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think Ohio State will be like in the 7-9 range.
It depends. How much do they value what Ohio State did to Michigan State and everybody else before they lost to Michigan on the road?
And you have Oregon winning, so they stay
Number
up
10.
at 10.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting. I wonder if they'd go above Michigan State as a P5 champ.
Oh, man. Oregon lost to Stanford, and they got blown out by Utah. I just don't think their resume is strong enough to upend Michigan State. But, again, all for
would have had a nice win late.
Speculation.
Yeah, Michigan State's just sitting there.
Okay, the point is BYU needs to, for sure, stay in the top 12, get to number 11. If they do that, then maybe they get into the Fiesta Bowl, and maybe they have a matchup with a team like Michigan State.
The uncomfortable truth is BYU needed to just have the one loss and actually had a shot here. I always believed that it was undefeated or bust. That's not true. This year it was one loss. Would have put BYU, I think, in a pretty comfortable at-large position. So let's look at the Boise State game and cry about it because that was hard. Baylor is a tip your cap. They were just better, and they're going to be better most days. Baylor's really good. They may be the Big 12 champs. But Boise State, that's a tough loss, man. That's a really tough loss in hindsight.
It's amazing that BYU has 2 losses and are still in the conversation.
Which is fun. In the end, that's all it's going to be, unfortunately.
We'll see. I mean, we laid out the ideal scenario. We'll see if it happens.
There were too many scenarios.
Okay. Yeah. 4 teams to root for this weekend. Our question of the day, are you still scoreboard watching, hoping for a BYU New Year's 6 possibility? Let's go to Voice of the Nation.
This is the Voice of the Nation on BYU Sports Nation.
At JFloyd314 on Twitter answers, until I see a college football playoff poll released that mathematically eliminates BYU, heck yes, I'm watching. Blue goggles firmly in place. Hashtag BYUSN.
Yeah, it's not good if the blue goggles are on because it typically means that's not reality, right? Coming up.
The whole season kind of has been a blue goggle season.
It has been awesome, yeah. So you don't need them on. It happened. Coming up, who's the best BYU athlete in the pros right now?
Oh, it's so mysterious with the college football playoff. Blaine Fowler joins us to discuss what he wants out of a bowl game if it's not a New Year's 6 game. This is BYU Sports Nation.
Money, vacation, opponent.
My name is Spencer Finnegan. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. During my sophomore year, I got married to my sweetheart, Mary, and there's tons of unexpected expenses when it comes to marriage. We were looking for scholarships. I found the replenishment grant, and my local alumni chapter gave me a grant to help me focus in on school. I'm so excited to, now that I've graduated, give back to those students that are coming to BYU in the future.
Tim Daly Ford in Spanish Fork offers a large inventory of Ford vehicles, including a selection of cars and trucks, providing a range of transportation choices. From the Ford Fusion sedan and the Edge crossover SUV to a range of pickups including the F-150. Each product line comes with options to enhance performance, comfort, and safety. Think Ford, think Tim Daly Ford in Spanish Fork.
Dexter & Dexter is a full-service law firm offering a wide range of legal services. Since 1995, we have helped more than 20,000 Utahns both to navigate life's challenges and to make the most of life's opportunities. From accidents to wills, from bankruptcy to business law, we are passionate about shouldering your burdens. To learn more about scheduling a no-obligation consultation, visit dexterlaw.com.
Let's kick off AFR on BYU TV.
What they did in that fourth quarter was not unexpected in my book.
Everyone did their job perfectly, and it resulted in, obviously, a touchdown.
Who knew that he had these kind of hands?
And right at the snap of the football, they both go right downhill. And that was the end of that. He knocked him down pretty quickly.
BYU Sports Nation is presented by the BYU Store, official outfitter of BYU fans everywhere.
It's the season finale of After Further Review. Join Dave McCann, Blaine Fowler, David Nixon as they review the win over USC. AFR is available tonight on the BYU TV app at 7 Eastern. Now, it's the season finale. Does that mean someone has to be eliminated? Like what's the drama going into next season?
That's a great question. We should have figured this out before now.
You think someone dies and they don't? Like, what happens? tonight. I'm interested to see what happens.
We're live in Studio B with your day-to-day BYU Sports play-by-play. I'm Spencer Linton alongside Jarom Jordan. Joining us now in the studio, Bizzle, is our dual-threat analyst, Uncle B, Blaine Fowler, a national champion, all-around good man.
You won the national championship. That's pretty cool, man.
I feel lower than you guys today. Am I lower than you guys?
Your paycheck's not lower.
Slouch a little bit so you don't. Yeah, there you go.
Wait.
Okay.
I feel better.
You feel better?
I want to be on your level.
Equal?
I want to be on your level.
Blaine,
No, it has nothing to do with you. I just want to be on your level.
We want to be on your level. Good gosh.
So I feel better now.
Fantastic. We just outlined what we think is going to happen in the New Year's 6 rankings tonight as far as it pertains to BYU. We think the Cougars are going to come in at number 12 and jump Oklahoma, who just lost their head coach and shot at the Big 12 title of losing to Oklahoma State.
Shot at the SEC title in a couple of years, too.
Hey, Blaine, is there any reason to believe that BYU would not jump at least one spot and be number 12 tonight?
I believe they'll be 12 tonight. Whenever we get to the end of the week, I go and look at every single projection from every national pundit to see. And we have to only give that so much weight because, remember, these are the same people that said that the over-under for BYU was 6.5 games to win this year. So although there's a lot, all of the
you're saying
the national pundits, like, so I'm talking about Sports Illustrated and CBS Sports and ESPN and all of these, you go look and just see what they're thinking. And so then I have to remind myself that, yeah, these are the same people that said BYU was going to win 6.5 games this year. Although I do think there's a lot more believers. And almost everybody has them at 12 tonight, which I think is where they're going to be. Then the big question is that enough to get them into a New Year's 6 with 10 wins and being at number 12? I saw, as you were outlining, a scenario where they get to 11. At this point, every single spot makes a difference. Huge. 11 is a big difference from 12 now, right? Then they don't have. I see a lot of these that have the number 2 team in the ACC instead of BYU with an at-large.
Number 2 ACC team?
Yeah,
no.
Which is like, come on,
it's champ only,
right? So come on, like why are you even doing that? There's some East Coast bias in some of these.
You don't understand how it works if you think the ACC number 2 is
right,
going, or Pac-12 number 2.
Exactly. No. And so, but there are some, and I'm just going, what are these people like? And these are national writers, and I'm going, come on. Like, that's not happening, right?
I tried to outline this, thanks to Spencer, on his New Year's 6 soapbox of, like, what bowls are attached to what conferences.
Right.
And what are at-large, right? It's Peach and Fiesta. There are 4 at-large spots. Notre Dame's getting one. ACC champ's getting one. And then probably Big 10-3 is getting one.
Yeah, Michigan State.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe Big 12-2 like,
that's depending on what happens with Oklahoma State and Baylor.
That's the trouble, is Big 10-3 and Big 12-2.
My favorite one that I looked at this weekend was Sports Illustrated because they had BYU in the Peach Bowl, which was they're my favorite.
Not even Fiesta, Peach.
They're my favorite right now. So, and so I think that your scenario is a very legitimate scenario. That's a great possibility that they get to 11 in the final ranking, and if they get to 11. Man, you'd have a lot of excuses to be making as a committee to not put BYU in when they're at 11 with a 10-2 record, and having beaten either first of all, Pac-12 South champion, but possibly in
the Pac-12
and probably the Pac-12 champion, right?
Probably, yeah.
And the second best team in the South, and the third best team in the South, and the second best team in the North, and I know one of the problems is the Pac-12's devaluated itself a little bit, which hurts BYU. In this instance.
This will be what the Big 12 becomes, by the way.
Right.
No great team, but a bunch of very good teams.
Yeah. So I think there's a legit shot. Like, I don't think like 3 weeks ago we're going, man, it's a long shot. I don't think it's quite as long as we think, because the scenario that you laid out is not a crazy scenario for them to get to 11.
Okay.
At 12, I still think it's there's too much margin for error for me to be really, really confident. But I think there's a legitimate shot that exactly the scenario you talk about happens, and they get to 11. If they get to 11, now I think it's a legit shot.
Now, the one thing that I did not mention in the opening block that is still out there is if BYU is number 12, let's say Baylor loses to Oklahoma State, but didn't drop below BYU because head-to-head or whatever. At that point, the committee has done their job, but the bowl committees can take who they want.
Right.
So they could say, look, I know Baylor's 11 and BYU's 12, but Baylor has 3 losses. They just lost in the Big 12 championship game. We know that BYU brings the heat in Phoenix, and they're going to sell a ton of tickets.
The heat in Phoenix. I like that.
We're going to go with BYU. They have that opportunity.
That'd be nice. And it'd be a return from 74 for BYU. It'd be the 0-1 game we wanted and didn't really get, fun. Right?
Yeah.
It'd be the 2014 game we were hoping for.
Sure.
That would be amazing.
And I know some people think, well, BYU's not a Power 5 school. They're not going to want to take the money away from the Power 5. But BYU's going to the Big 12, so does that ideology kind of go away?
I think it changes the mentality.
I agree.
I think the whole discussion about BYU this year, from the time the Big 12 was announced, all of a sudden BYU got treated differently. They're not even in yet, but I feel like on a national basis, and I feel like the committee, what they were telling us last year we didn't like. BYU didn't play anybody. They didn't play any P5s, right? The committee has kind of put their money where their mouth is this year. They've rewarded BYU for playing 7 P5s.
Yes.
And for being 6-1 and for being 5-0 against the Pac-12. We'll see if they reward them again tonight for being 5-0 against the Pac-12 and move them up to 12. So far, the committee has been consistent. The very things that we were upset with them about last year, they've put up this year. They've said, listen, last year we didn't put you here because of this. This year the schedule is different. Last year, now we see it was not an aberration. I also think it helps, and you think that these guys don't look this in depth. I think they do. The teams that BYU beat last year, because you build one year onto the next, right? You stand on the shoulders of last year. All of a sudden, like UTSA is really like
11-1. San Diego State 11-1.
These
Houston,
schools, right? The schools that BYU beat last year are really good this year. Again. And so they're going, well, you know what? Maybe last year's 11-1 was better than we gave them credit for, because look at these schools, and now they just proved it, because they went out and played basically a P5 schedule. They played schedule as if they were in any not like the SEC or the Big Ten, but hey. This schedule's as tough as anybody that played in the ACC. This schedule's as tough as anybody that played in the Pac-12. And so I think that committee's given them credit, and we'll see tonight if they do. And then we'll see if Baylor loses in that game to Oklahoma State, if BYU moves in front, a 2-loss BYU team ahead of a 3-loss Baylor team. I think they would, based on what they've done so far this season.
That's a great point. And what we don't want to acknowledge is that Coastal was actually good too. Like, the one loss was to a team that was good.
They were really good.
We don't want to say it, but it's true. Okay, let's talk hoops. BYU's up to number 12, Blaine. They make this massive jump from 18 to 12. Highest ranking at this point of the season ever. How high can this team go right now?
From a talent perspective, I think that ranking's right. From where they're at, and this is just from talking to Mark Pope. Mark Pope says, hey, we're good. This is a good basketball team. We have a ton of talent, but we're nowhere close to as good as we're going to be.
Whoa, what?
He told me 4 games ago, give us 5 or 6 more games, and then I think we're going to have a chance to be who we're going to be. I was going, whoa, they're already really good, because this is a team that can win games when they're not shooting it well, which is a big difference, because then you don't lose games you're not supposed to lose. You go on the road and you play and you're not shooting it great, but all of a sudden you lock a team down. BYU's phenomenal offensive rebounding. So when they're not making shots, they get second opportunities. They're really highly ranked in rebounding margin. Their assisted turnover rates, all the assisted turnover ratios, top 25. And so all of the little things that you have to do to win when you're not shooting it well, those things that San Diego State, for instance, is good at every single solitary year, where we're usually like, hey, BYU just needs to go score 85 points a game and shoot great from 3, and that's how they win. And then they have an off shooting night, and they lose on the road to a team they're not supposed to lose to. That's not this team. This team legitimately could go on the road, shoot terrible, and win.
That happened Saturday.
Right?
2 threes.
Right. And so what Mark's saying is, offensively, they just need a little time. There's so many new pieces that guys are still a little bit hesitant. Like, well, wait a minute, is this my shot or is this not my shot? And if you're not shooting with confidence in rhythm, knowing this is like the minute the ball's being either kicked out to you or coming on the swing to you, where as soon as I touch the ball, I'm shooting this. This is my shot in this offense. They're still not quite there yet with some of these guys. Foose is getting better every minute of every game, right? Tejan, he's almost there, but he's not as good as he's going to be yet, because he still hesitates once in a while on whether or not it's his or not. He's dramatically better now than he was to start the season, because he's understanding his role. And he and Alex are figuring out how to play together. Gavin Baxter's minutes are increasing. Wait till Gavin can play 28 minutes a game. because he's a force out there, right?
Running the floor.
And Atiki, he's going to get more and more minutes because he's going to understand defensive rotations and how he's supposed to defend the ball screens, and because he's getting better every game. So there's a lot of young pieces, there's a lot of new pieces. And I'll tell you a guy that I think before the season's over, we're going to go, whoa, that guy's good. And right now we're going, oh, how good is he? Is Seneca Knight. Because he's in my opinion, behind Lucas in understanding his role. But he's a crazy skilled player, right? And then some of our good three-point shooters, Trevenell's not quite shooting it the way I think he's going to shoot it when he figures out how this team works offensively. I love the way Spencer Johnson's playing. He's figured out his role. That guy's playing at a really high level.
A lot of confidence.
On both sides of the ball, right? We've always known he's a great defender. So I think 12's legit. Can they be higher than that? If this offense can come together the way I think it can and the way Mark Pope thinks it can to match the little things they're doing, like rebounding the basketball and playing defense and keeping teams down in terms of scoring. This is a really good team in scoring defense, right?
59 points
yeah,
a game.
this can be a legit top 12 basketball team all season long. I think they have to shoot the ball better, especially from three, if they want to make noise in the NCAA tournament. But this is a very talented, maybe most athletic top to bottom basketball team BYU's had.
Wow, I mean, based on the ranking, the Cougars are pacing for a 3 or a 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. Which
now
just
we're talking
sounds
about a Sweet
crazy.
16, right? Yeah,
Right? Yeah.
If that's the case.
Man. Yeah, great stuff from BYU basketball and football and everybody across the athletic department in No Loss November.
Did we ever figure out, have any other programs, I don't know, like it's crazy to me, all sports, no losses in a whole month?
I can't recall
it'd be hard to know.
Well, especially,
That's crazy.
and I would say November might be the hardest month to do that in. And the reason is basketball's in full swing, football's still going. Women's basketball's in full swing. Soccer's still going.
In the NCAA
tournament. So you're late in the season, right? And so football's late in the season. Is it a harder month of the year for a full athletic program in college to go without a single loss? I'm not sure that there is, and I'd be interested. We have to put our researchers on it. Has anybody else done that?
We need researchers to do that.
We need researchers because we don't have the time. So
we've got time to make banners and stuff.
Yes, we do.
We have time to look at all the New Year's Six
and New Year's Six stuff,
but not that. Yes.
Blaine, thanks. Look forward to After Further Review tonight.
Thanks, guys.
And BYU tomorrow. Let's go, baby. Coming up, Tegan Graham on being ranked number 21 in women's hoops at Utah this week too.
One of 8 ranked teams at BYU right now. 8.
Amazing.
And Taysom or Zach, whose jersey you're wearing in a couple of weeks when those two former BYU quarterbacks square off. This is BYU Sports Nation.
Fred Warner.
BYU Food to Go's convenient location at 2191 North Canyon Road in Provo makes bringing popular BYU foods to your next event easy. Everything's ready when you need it at the drive and load pickup. You drive in and they load no matter the weather. And stop in the on-site creamery for great BYU chocolate milk and ice cream. BYU Food to Go, bringing campus to your table. Call for details, 801-422-5001.
Welcome to a partnership where customer experience comes first. It's our focus. It's your expectation. We provide support to those that go the extra mile for all of us. Supplying products, training, and service for generations. Learn more at bradyindustries.com.
I watch BYU TV because it has good programming for all family members, aligns to my values.
BYU TV really does help me with my parenting. It helps me show my kids good examples of the way that we should live.
No matter what you watch or listen, you always leave feeling better.
All of us together. together.
This portion of BYU Sports Nation is presented by Visible Supply Chain Management.
BYU basketball's Mark Pope is tonight. Hang out with Craig Rubel, Coach Pope. Caleb Loner, what's up? 8:30 Eastern on the BYU TV app to go over the big win against Utah and Utah Valley and Missouri State this week on the road.
He is Jarom Jordan. I'm Spencer Linton, and this is BYU Sports Nation. To interact with the show and get fabulous content throughout your day, follow us on all of the major social media platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Let's whip it! Cougar Whip Around presented by Visible Supply Chain Management, tackling America's most challenging shipping problems.
And there are a lot of shipping problems right now.
There are.
With Zach Wilson back with the Jets and Taysom Hill expected to start this week for the Saints Thursday night, have you bought your flight to New York yet for next week's Taysom versus Zach game, and whose jersey are you wearing?
You know, I legitimately thought about attending this game and flying out there, but I don't think I could wear a jersey. This is a really hard situation because I love both those guys, and I wouldn't do that. I'd probably wear a neutral color. Probably just wear black because both teams have black in their uniform combinations.
Yeah.
But I couldn't do it. Like, I thought about it a long time this morning. Like, nope, can't do it. Love them both.
That'd be fun to be at the game. I would never wear a non-Seahawks jersey. I would never do that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I probably should not wear a non-Bengals jersey. Still waiting to debut my Joe Burrow jersey that I just recently got, too.
Joseph Burrow. Awesome.
Joe Burrow. Go Bengals.
Go Tigers.
Go. Bengals and the Bengal Tiger.
The Bengal Tiger.
There you go.
Bengal.
Brett McMurphy's latest bowl projections. Listen to this. Have BYU playing LSU, speaking of Ed Orgeron and Joe Burrow. LSU in the Independence Bowl. What? Does that matchup against LSU make the Independence Bowl more palatable?
Yeah.
Infinitely, right?
Like a good bowl of gumbo. Yeah. If that was the case, I wouldn't mind that at all because we'll discuss this in the next couple weeks, but, like, what do you want out of a bowl game? I want a great game. I don't really care where it's played or how much BYU even gets paid. Like, that's great for the athletic department, but from a fan's perspective, like, yeah, I just want a great matchup.
For those wondering, the Independence Bowl payout per team is $2.2 million. And I know a lot of people are like, well, if it's not the Fiesta Bowl in Phoenix, why not the Guaranteed Rate Bowl? That's $1.6 million. So it's $600,000 less, but I guess a better location, and it would be a Big Ten opponent in that game. But if you get LSU in the Independence Bowl, man, that would be hard to argue with. It'd be really fun.
Yeah, LSU, that'd be fun.
Be kind of a home game. Well, a de facto home game for LSU.
Semi-away.
In Shreveport.
Yep.
But, hey, absolutely, that'd be exciting.
Texas held a basketball game against Sam Houston State in the 3,200-seat Gregory Gym. Was available to students only. Should BYU do the same thing in the Smith Fieldhouse for the Rock for a men's basketball game?
You know, it's fun to see these occasionally, and the Smith Fieldhouse hosted a women's basketball game a few years back, which I thought was cool. There's too much juice for BYU men's basketball right now. I don't want to exclude anybody.
Texas has been in the top 10. They did it anyway.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know if I like that. Like, I'm all about pack the Marriott Center, man. The students only thing is fun. Maybe for like a blue-white game or like a Midnight Madness thing.
Well, Midnight Madness, no problem, right? But yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to one game against a crappy team.
Okay.
Yeah.
So who's the said crappy team?
Central Methodist. Central Methodist should have been that game. But at that game, there were like 14,000 people. It was incredible. So maybe not. By the way, men's volleyball played in the Marriott Center a few times. Yeah. Get a big crowd, set the NCAA record multiple times. They're never going to do that because it takes away the home court advantage of the Smithfield.
It's a special place.
Unique
The
spot.
Fieldhouse is a special place.
Yeah.
BYU women's basketball debuts at number 21 in the AP poll.
Yeah.
Their highest ranking ever, is number 18.
That's shocking to me.
Will BYU women's basketball surpass their highest ever ranking this season?
Oh, yes, in like 2 weeks, a week or two, okay? Because they're going to play teams that aren't necessarily ranked right now. They're playing Utah.
Beat Utah.
No votes in the AP poll right now. Go and beat Utah. That's going to happen. Washington State, Oklahoma. These teams are getting votes, like a vote or two. BYU's better than all these teams. BYU's going to go on a freaking roll right now.
Go.
This team's so good. They're so fun to watch. If you haven't been to a game or even watched them, you need to.
Even if BYU lost one of those 3 games, I think they've done enough right now to remain ranked and would still be in position to, at a later point in the WCC when they are rolling, still surpass that.
I think BYU's going to have 3 or fewer losses in the regular season. I really do. Woo! I think BYU's that good.
Man, after what they did to St. Petersburg, it's hard to argue with that.
This team's Sweet 16 good. They are.
We've been saying it for a while.
They are. They might even do more. Who knows? But they're that good. I'm so excited to watch them, honestly. Really fun. Ashley Hatch scored 2 goals in 2 matches for the USA women's national team versus Australia. Just won the Golden Boot for the NWSL champ Washington Spirit. Is she the best BYU athlete in the pros right now?
Who's better than Ashley Hatch right now? Who's competing at the highest level with the U.S. national team?
It's hard to argue.
And scoring goals.
Like #1 player in a statistical category, champ, and scoring for the national team. I don't think there is anybody right now.
No.
Like right this second, nobody.
Like Fred Warner's amazing, right?
If Fred Warner is all-pro again and wins the Super Bowl,
right?
Niners might not even make the playoffs. Like, no, it's different.
Like, yeah, who else qualifies for that?
Like Elijah Bryant was awesome, but like he wasn't, scoring the most points for the Bucs.
He wasn't playing in the Olympics for Team USA.
Right? Brandon Davies.
Ashley might be playing in the Olympics at some point with Team USA.
Not even Brandon Davies can lead Uganda out of Africa.
Like, think about these names. Abby Wambach, Carly Lloyd. Yeah. Like,
Megan Rapinoe.
That's the senior team. That's the team Ashley Hatch is playing on right now.
Yes, and some of them aren't. Like, Carly Lloyd retired, so she's not playing anymore. But yes. No, it's incredible what she's doing.
It's Ashley.
She's as good as my voice is bad right now. It's so bad.
You're just being too hard on yourself, man.
You might need to take me off.
Okay.
I might need to tap my helmet. Coming up, rank the Pac-12 wins this season in Top 5 Tuesday.
And
much to the chagrin of all you Utes watching or listening.
One of those stars of BYU women's basketball, Tegan Graham, is in Studio
Graham.
B.
What's up?
How does she feel about the number 21 ranking? This is BYU Sports Nation.
Long live New Zealand.
If I got hurt and was laid up at home, I wouldn't even think to call a lawyer. What a hassle. I'd want to meet them first.
What if I told you that for your first consultation, your lawyer will come to you, home or hospital?
Really?
Really.
They do that?
If you've been injured, we'll come to you. It's your job to get better. It's our job to deal with the insurance companies.
Learn more at siegfriedandjensen.com.
Hi, Spencer Linton here, letting you know when your company joins the BYU team as a corporate partner, your brand can be featured in sports programming on BYU TV and BYU Radio. In addition to all of the great games, you can be part of the BYU coaches shows, place your message in Countdown to Kickoff, basketball pre- and post-game shows, and each weekday on BYU Sports Nation. We invite your team to join ours and become a corporate sponsor of BYU Athletics. For details, email sponsorship@byu.edu today.
Christmas Eve, we heard banging on our door, shouting, everyone needs to evacuate the building, pull out of the garage, and we're driving away. Kaboom.
What is happening?
Welcome home. We want to help you replace those Christmas memories with all new holiday memories.
That one's for you.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. This is gorgeous.
BYU Sports Nation is presented by the BYU Store, official outfitter of BYU fans everywhere.
On the latest Deep Blue podcast, I talked with BYU Senior Associate Athletic Director Liz Darger about going from aspiring Utah State walk-on volleyball player to high school basketball coach to senior woman administrator at BYU, who helped with NCAA Common Ground and was part of the group, helped BYU into the Big 12. Listen to it on the BYU Radio app and where podcasts are found.
What has she even done, Jarom?
Liz is amazing. She's really, really influential in the athletic department. And if you don't know her, check out the podcast.
You just laid out a pretty nice LinkedIn resume for her right there.
Oh, yeah. She's amazing. Man.
Holy cow.
She's amazing.
Welcome back to BYU Sports Nation, live from Studio B. And speaking of women that are performing at a high level, we are joined by one on the BYU women's basketball team, Tegan Graham of the 21st ranked Cougars.
Tegan Graham's legit. Listen, we need to have you on like every other week, I swear.
Tegan, can you stick around for a few more years and be like an 8th-year BYU senior?
Right.
You cool with that?
At this point, why not?
Is this your 6th year of college basketball?
Yes.
Okay, 4 at Colgate.
Yep.
Transfer.
Yep.
Now 2 at BYU due to COVID. You got next year?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I've asked you this before, and I know the answer, but for those that don't know, why did you pick BYU after Colgate?
That's a really good question. I just think the team was it's just a culture I wanted to be part of. Obviously, BYU sports in general is really, really good and really successful. But, I had a teammate in high school who played at BYU Chalet, and she was, she had such a great experience, and she was like, you have to come here. And I was like, okay.
And there are several Kiwis on the team. Let's talk about it.
Yep, Ari and Kaylee,
Yep.
both from New Zealand. We've got a strong Kiwi
Which
Kiwi
is awesome.
bond.
Yeah, and you talked about Chalet Salmon, who played here, Kalani Purcell and others.
Yep.
What is it about New Zealand and BYU women's basketball? That's cool.
Yeah, I think it's just like everyone talks about the Kiwi pipeline, but I think it's real. Like, I think, people feel comfortable with, people that they know talking about experiences that they've had, right? So that's, coming from a small island, seeing people be successful and having a lot of fun and enjoying their experience, it's really hard to turn that down, right? So I don't know. I hope more Kiwis keep coming.
Where are you from in New Zealand?
Wellington, the capital.
Wellington, yep. Awesome. Obviously, people know I love New Zealand. A lot of that has to do with Lord of the Rings. A lot of that has to do with the fact that I call rugby games for the team here locally in Utah.
You do?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
It's super fun. So I
Utah
love rugby.
You're a big rugby guy?
I'm a huge rugby guy. I've never played the game. I just
Respect.
call it. Yeah. Oh, thanks. But yeah, what is it about sort of, and I think generally people love Kiwis. Like, you guys are happy, you're in a good mood, you're smart. Like, what is it about New Zealand that is attractive to people?
I think we're a small country. We just have a lot of, fun, like you said, good-hearted, loving people. I don't know. I think my country's pretty awesome. I think other people think my country's pretty awesome, and they want to be around people who are awesome.
I got to go to New Zealand.
I was just thinking,
I got to go to Hobbiton.
When can we go to New Zealand?
All of that, yeah.
I mean, if you love Lord of the Rings.
I have to.
Like, they have tours and everything. You can do the whole.
With technology, we can do BYU Sports World from New Zealand.
Yes, we can.
Live from
100%.
New Zealand.
And another part, I think, is obviously, like, Maori culture as well. And, like, the respect of the haka and, like, how sacred and special that is, too. So
100%.
it's pretty awesome. And it's like, not everyone's Maori who is New Zealand, from New Zealand, obviously.
Yeah.
Like yourself. But, yeah, it's cool. So how have you integrated sort of New Zealand culture into this team dynamic? Is there anything that, like, comes out that is helpful with this team?
That's a really good question. I think, honestly, just family. I mean, I feel like BYU has really good family values, but I feel like New Zealand's such a community culture, and I think that hopefully has been something that maybe the Kiwis can bring to the team and bring to BYU a little bit more.
Now, in talking with the coaches in the offseason, we knew about Shaylee and what she's capable of and how smooth she is with the basketball, and Paisley's the ultimate competitor, and Lauren is an incredible rebounder.
Beast.
But they kept coming back to you saying,
Aw.
now, Tegan has taken a significant step in the offseason. What did you do in the offseason? Because you were already a really good player, but now you're playing at an even better level. What did you do to get to this new level?
I think I'm really competitive, and I think the team is really competitive, and we have a bunch of really good freshmen that just came in. So I think the level of play stepped up this summer. We have so many people that can play. Our team is so deep. And like I said, I like to compete and, get amongst it. So I don't know. I feel like that just raises the bar so much for everybody on the team, right? You just raise the level of how we want to play and how we want to win.
BYU women's hoops, get amongst it. Like, you led the WCC in three-point shooting, and you continued that shooting, 41% this year. What is it about the three-point shot that is so successful for you?
It's actually funny. I didn't shoot threes in high school.
What?
Nope. Never.
Wow.
And then I came to America, and I was like, I got to add something more to my bag. And so I tore my ACL my freshman year, and I just worked on my shot that whole kind of 9 months that I was out. And then that kind of became my bag. That kind of became what I did. I don't know. I think I have a lot of confidence. My team has a lot of confidence in me, and shoot is shoot. So.
Yes, they do. And when you shoot, they go in.
It goes in, and you become a starter on this team. Obviously, role reversal, like Sarah gets into some foul trouble sometimes. To eliminate that, they're like, hey, let's put Tegan in there.
Yeah.
How has that dynamic changed things? Because now you guys are undefeated, 7-0, ranked in the top 25.
You're starting with a small lineup, yeah.
Yeah, we are actually. We have a pretty small lineup. I think, again, like it just comes back to how we play and how we compete. I think our team has a lot of confidence in everyone, right? So I think whoever's on the floor is doing the job, right? Clearly we're 7-0. But yeah, I think it just comes back to competing, and we're really good at doing that.
7-0, back-to-back wins over top 25 teams in St. Petersburg.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and you didn't have your head coach because he unfortunately was out sick, but we are excited to report that he should be back Wednesday to practice, which is awesome.
Tomorrow.
Love you, Juddy.
You can just dork around today.
Yeah.
The teacher will be back.
Don't say that. He might listen to this.
Final practice without
Lee
Juddy.
Commard, the substitute teacher.
Tegan!
I sound like Jeff right now.
You do. Are you doing this on purpose to make me feel comfortable right now?
I can't, I can't not do it.
Shaylee!
Kaylee, I mean,
why are you so good at that?
We've practiced a lot here.
We've practiced.
That's so fun.
What's the difference between the interim head coach, Lee Commard, who was with you over the last 3 wins, and Jeff Judkins?
Both are amazing. I can't really. I mean, they're different coaches, right? They have different styles, but Lee stepped up in a big way. I think Juddy, very proud. But yeah, he's fun. Everybody loves Lee. Everybody trusts Lee. They respect him, and he went out there and did the job. Has
Juddy ever called you the wrong name?
Who told you to ask me that question?
We've been around here longer than you. We know.
Yes.
What does he call you?
Well, it's kind of funny. He gets me and Siggy mixed up a lot.
Okay.
We do live together and we hang out a lot, so that might be why. But he calls me Siggy a lot, and he calls her Tegan. But that's about it. I don't get it as much. There's definitely other players on the team that get the name thing a lot more than I do.
That's funny.
Well, it's Shaylee. Shayla.
He did call her Chalet.
Chalet
A couple days ago. A couple weeks ago.
We love him so much.
Yeah, all in good fun, right?
He is hilarious.
He's
Congratulations on great success thus far. We look forward to many
success.
Yes.
At Utah this week. Let's go.
BYU women's basketball.
Saturday.
Get amongst it.
Let's have a no-loss December now.
Oh, let's go. I love it.
We love it. Tegan, let's give you some BYU Sports Nation karma to keep it rolling, okay? You come on the show. You help us out. We're going to give you some karma.
Let's do that.
You're going to shoot
I believe
the
in
three
good
well.
energy.
Yes.
I believe in
energy.
that.
Love it.
Good energy.
Take the karma, roll with it. Let's go.
Awesome.
Thanks, Keegan. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Again, we need you on the lot.
Keegan, or is it...
Did I say Keegan? I'm so sorry.
Now he's doing the Juddy thing. He's doing the Juddy thing.
Did it on purpose.
No, I didn't. I'm sorry. Tegan. I know it's Tegan.
That's well played.
Tegan Graham.
Get amongst it, people.
Get amongst it. Coming up, today's Rise and Shoutouts. Oh, my God.
And Top 5 Tuesday ranks the 5 wins over the Pac-12. Why? Because we can. This is BYU Sports Nation.
Pac-12 champs.
This portion of BYU Sports Nation is presented by Delta Airlines. Keep climbing.
Trio Orem Senior Living believes in empowering seniors to live life to the fullest. We help eliminate stress out of daily life when you live at Trio. Less time focusing on housework means you can socialize at one of our many events, with safety in mind, of course. And did we mention our spacious apartments with modern amenities? Learn more about setting up a private tour at trioorem.com.
In a competition to win it all, they'll put everything on the line. Nature can be challenging. Elements can be harsh. Tensions can run deep. And sometimes it may seem hopeless. But giving up is never an option. And if they band together as a family, they will always stand a chance. Wow! Because real victory isn't just about surviving together. It's about living together. Watch Survivalists on BYU TV or the free BYU TV app.
I'm fully supportive of your father's decision. This family needs time out.
We said peace and quiet. You don't get quieter than this.
Oh, you mean it's haunted?
I shall become their living nightmare.
Beyond Ghostbusters. I have a plan.
It's nice to meet you.
I am cursed.
This place is starting to feel like home. How do you plead?
For mercy. For love is always with you. And love is stronger than death.
This portion of BYU Sports Nation is presented by Mountain America, the official credit union of BYU Athletics.
12th ranked men's hoops. That sounds amazing. Plays at 6-1 Utah Valley, who has 3 overtime wins tomorrow. 8 Eastern radio coverage, 8:30 Eastern BYU TV coverage. Connor Harding, Colby Leifson, Blaze Neal back on BYU TV.
BYU Sports Nation always available on demand via the BYU TV and BYU radio apps. Let's go to Top 5 Tuesday, presented by Delta Airlines. Keep climbing. If you haven't heard, BYU football, a perfect 5-0 against Pac-12 competition this season. Thus the banner in Studio B and the T-shirts we had on yesterday. Let's look back at all 5 of those wins and rank them. Number 5.
Arizona. BYU beat Arizona 24-16 in Vegas. It was awesome. On to number 4.
Following back-to-back losses, the only 2 losses of the season for BYU, Cougars had a big game traveling to Pullman and beating a good Washington State team. Tyler Algier, 21-19 victory. He had 191 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground.
32 carries. Number 3, USC. That was last week. BYU pretty beat up. Got it done. 35-31. Jackson McChesney, Caleb Hayes, Tyler Algier, Jaron Hall. All awesome. Puka Nacua as well. BYU's first win of the season when losing the turnover margin, which means they really had to win the game.
-2, found a way.
Found a way.
At number 2, following the 2-0 start and a number 23 ranking, the Cougars hosted number 19 Arizona State in front of another raucous crowd at LaVell Edwards Stadium. Play of the year happened as Tyler Algier chases down an intercepted pass and the tomahawk punch happens.
So good.
Incredible. BYU's first win this season, third win this season overall, number 2 in this list.
Number 1, Utah. Any question this would be the win? BYU beat then 21st ranked Utah, 26-17. Ended the 9-game losing streak. It was the day after BYU was invited to the Big 12. It was the greatest weekend in the history of BYU athletics. Cougars ended the streak and have the bragging rights, which has triggered the Utah fan base this entire season.
And the Utes got to sit on that loss for a couple of more years.
And they're very happy about it, as you can tell from the 100 replies to my picture of the banner from yesterday on Twitter.
Our question of the day: are you still scoreboard watching, hoping for a BYU New Year's Six possibility? Our elite voice of the day presented by Sundance Mountain Resort from @Quinlan Hagland.
Quinn.
Keep saying, Spencer, Linton, and Jarom Jordan keep saying we have a chance, so how could I not be scoreboard watching?
Yeah, once I jumped on board, then it felt like there was, it was real. It was like, oh, even if I think there's a shot, then maybe it's actually legit, right?
Today's rise.
No offense.
Hey, I'm
just defense.
I knew I was right for a long time. Today's rise and shout out to Mountain America, the official credit union of BYU Athletics. How about Ashley Hatch?
Amazing.
Women's basketball.
Yep.
Women's volleyball cleaning up in the awards.
All of it, baby.
Thanks to today's guests, Blaine Fowler and Tegan Graham. Sorry, Dennis. For Jarom, I'm Spencer. Shout out to Ambrosia Anderson. We'll see you on AFR tonight on the BYU TV app.